Steam machines were stupid, and I said it from day one. They had so many issues. What was their market? What was that controller? What was this communication about what is this thing? So is the Steam Deck also going to be another thing on the list of Valve's disasters? No, at least probably not. So what were the issues with Steam Machine? And the Steam Deck, which is definitely the spiritual successor to the Steam Machine idea, how does that solve those problems? Look at this controller. Let's just start there. Okay, this is a Steam controller. I did buy one because I was very intrigued by this thing. I don't think this was inherently a bad idea. This thing was so close to being good that it made it all the more heartbreaking that it wasn't. Although I know there are some big Steam controller fans out there, but you guys, just face it, you're a minority. So what was wrong with this thing? Okay, this does so many things right. The problem is it tries to be two things and it isn't great at either of them. It's almost good. It tries to be a controller, but here's the problem. If I'm gonna play a game on my couch, most PC games are also available on consoles, so they offer normal gamepad support, in which case, I'm gonna use my Xbox controller. You know why? Because the game is designed to have a right thumbstick when I'm in gamepad mode. The Steam controller doesn't have a right joystick. It just has this touchpad thing. I think the touchpad thing is a great idea. The problem is you also need a right joystick. And guess what solved that problem? Steam Deck. They realized the issue. Because again, if the game is designed to work with a gamepad, I'm gonna use it like a gamepad. It was designed with this controller in mind. No games are designed with this thing in mind. Apparently I actually turned this thing on, didn't realize it still had batteries. I haven't used it in years. This thing was almost good at being a controller, but not quite, mainly in my opinion, just due to the missing joystick. But it was also not perfect at doing what it was also supposed to do, which is basically be, okay, what if I want to play a PC game that's supposed to work with a mouse, but I'm sitting on my couch? How does that work? Well, now you've got these joystick things, and this is supposed to solve that problem. Now, I actually think this does a fairly good job at that. And I also love that it has the gyroscopic controls, but I liked when I was getting used to trying to use this thing for aiming, trying to aim with the motion control. So you get in the general vicinity and then you can, dial it in a bit, take your shot. You can actually get used to this, and this thing can work surprisingly well. And then again, on games that are supposed to be running with a mouse and don't have any kind of gamepad support, having a touchpad is way better than just either not being able to play the game at all or trying to force it to somehow work with a gamepad when it's really not supposed to. The Steam Deck fixes this controller issue, as far as I can tell. Now, how could this still possibly go wrong? I haven't physically held one of these things in my hand, so I can't tell you how comfortable it's gonna be. One big thing with controller design can just be how does it actually feel in your hands? And that can also be different for different people, the size of your hands, all sorts of things, but that's where this could still fall apart. It needs to feel comfortable and feel premium when you're playing with that thing. I hope they nail that, because they've at least solved what is, in my opinion, the biggest design flaw. So, as like an interesting side note, I've also read that they've added a capacitive touch sensor to the right thumbstick so that you can take your thumb off to turn off the gyroscopic aiming controls. Let's say if you just want to turn around and get situated on your couch, then put your thumb back on there and it'll reactivate it. I think that's an interesting touch that I think will actually help in the ease of use of using gyroscopic aiming along with the thumbstick. So I think they've done a lot of good stuff with that, and I'm very excited to see how it actually feels in the hand. Now, what's the other big issue with Steam machines? The biggest issue with Steam machines, way bigger issue than the controller thing, is just that, like, what was their market? Who were these for? And I ranted about this to all my friends when these things launched. I didn't have a YouTube channel to rant to back then. My friends didn't really care. I know one of my students, I'm a math teacher if you didn't know, anyway, one of my students was talking about, this was back in like 2015 when these things were launching, like, I get into PC gaming, I'm gonna get myself a Steam machine. And I was like, for the love of God, don't get a Steam machine. Why? So apparently there were people interested in them, but why? What were these things for? Who was this market? Because if I want to have a gaming PC, I should just get a gaming PC. If I want to have a gaming console, I should just get a gaming console, because the Steam machines couldn't deliver as good of an experience as either of those things could do. My gaming PC here hooks up to my TV that's in my living room right there. I can just run an HDMI cord and play it that way. And I mean, obviously that doesn't work in everybody's setup, but I mean, that's the basic idea with the Steam machine. You're just plugging in a gaming PC to your TV, except it's more limited because it doesn't come with Windows, which is, I guess, designed to make this thing maybe cheaper because they don't pay the licensing fee, but then also just like run more like a gaming console. But here's the problems with that. Number one, the price. To get these things priced as low as a gaming console, the hardware wasn't actually that good for gaming at TV style resolutions, which at the time was more like 1080p. But, you know, so we weren't really targeting 4K exactly the way consoles are now. But okay, you have to have low-end hardware in that thing. And then a lot of those Steam Machine boxes were designed to be small little console things. They're going to be hard to upgrade if you ever wanted to, or impossible to upgrade. So you're basically getting all the worst features of a gaming console, but usually because console games are heavily optimized for that experience, they're going to actually run the games possibly better than what your Steam machine can do. And not only that, you're running on this weird Steam OS version of Linux, which at the time didn't really support every game. It supported a lot of games, but not all of them, and the performance wasn't always all that great. So has the Steam Deck solved these issues? I think it has. Number one, who is this for? Well, it's not going to compete directly with your console audience. It's also not going to compete directly with your PC gaming system audience. It's carving out its own niche. And you might be like, the Nintendo Switch, it's competing with the Nintendo Switch. Kind of. It is competing with the Nintendo Switch, but I actually know people who want both. There are people who are very interested in the handheld form factor. This handheld form factor solves these problems I mentioned. Number one, the power of the system. No, it's not very powerful, but because they're keeping the price low, and then you have to deal with battery life issues anyway, so you wouldn't want it to be much more powerful than it is, because then you just need to be plugged in all the time to even run the thing. So it solves this problem because, for one thing, it has an 800p screen, which on a small screen, 800p is going to look fine. And in this kind of form factor where you're usually playing with a controller with the thumbsticks, 30 frames per second in major AAA games is actually kind of fine. Obviously, I'd rather have 60 frames per second, but older games can run at 60 frames per second. So it's solving the issue of, by keeping a low price and the hardware power down, then you're, by running at the low resolution, actually doing okay. And you're not competing directly with a gaming PC, which I could have just plugged into my TV anyway, from a power standpoint. That Steam Deck can do something that my gaming PC can't. The only console that can compete with it is a Nintendo Switch, but I'd argue again that these aren't exactly direct competitors. For one thing, and you Nintendo fans, if you're watching this, I know my channel's more PC gamers, so maybe I won't get hit by some backlash here. The Nintendo console, while definitely enjoyable to adults, and I have one for me, not just for my kids, is in many ways targeted at children. It's targeted at everybody, but in many ways, Nintendo consoles are geared to, at least not only for children, but they are targeted to be a very family-friendly device. My 4-year-old absolutely loves playing Mario Kart with me, and it even has things where, like, the car can almost drive itself and she can just motion tilt the thing, right? This isn't the kind of thing that the Steam Deck is necessarily targeting. I think the Steam Deck, while it might be easier to run and get into than a normal, gaming PC, especially when running Linux, to the average person, it's gonna probably involve a lot more tinkering and be less easy to just download the game and play it than it is on something like the Nintendo Switch. So not necessarily targeting the same people. I believe Gabe Newell said that within 10 seconds of holding a Nintendo Switch or a Steam Deck, you'll know which one is for you. They're definitely not targeting exactly the same market, although if you look at the Venn diagram of people who are really interested in a Nintendo Switch and people really interested in the Steam Deck, there's going to be some overlap to that Venn diagram. But there's no reason why some people won't buy both, other than just, I mean, yeah, some people won't want both and won't be able to afford it or whatever. But I know that when this thing launched, I had people on my social media that I know are not PC gamers saying I have to get a Steam Deck because they love handheld gaming and they're very interested in this device for that. For one thing, because it's going to be very easy to tinker with, run emulators, plus people who have a Nintendo Switch, here's kind of the interesting thing. I've actually long advocated that the Nintendo Switch is a fantastic gaming console. Like if you're going to have a gaming PC and you're only going to get one gaming console, I've actually advocated that the Nintendo Switch might make the most sense because it's offering something a gaming PC doesn't, which is the portability and handheld form factor, as well as a large library of exclusive games from Nintendo, and many of those are very good. However, the Steam Deck is offering that game library experience. It's offering that game library argument to Nintendo Switch users. If somebody has a Nintendo Switch and doesn't have a gaming PC and hasn't been into PC gaming, but they love handheld gaming, the opportunity of getting a Steam Deck opens up a vast library of PC games, or even games that were available on other consoles but not the Nintendo Switch, for various reasons, possibly due to its not being super powerful, that kind of a thing. So the Steam Deck actually might be something that people would buy and already own a Nintendo Switch. So I think there's a lot of people who have a Nintendo Switch who will also buy a Steam Deck. And so they're not in as much of direct competition because there's also going to be people interested in the Steam Deck that aren't interested in the Nintendo platform. I think overall, it's a really cool system. Now, how could Valve still screw this up? Well, one thing that needs to be true, that they have, I've seen a Twitter post that they claim this is true, is that games have to run well off the SD card. Because that base model being at $399 is a big deal. Price point on this is everything. If these things cost $1,000, I would never consider buying one. If they're $399, that's the kind of thing I might actually buy. But that $399 model comes with 64 gigabytes of memory. But it has expandable storage on the SD card. So games definitely won't run as quickly off of an SD card. But if it's just load times, but the game actually plays just fine running off that SD card, that's good enough. If I can just plop in more SD card storage and play my games, that's going to solve one of the major issues. It keeps that base model with that low price point relevant and really offers cheap expandable storage, which is one of the main limitations on the system. The other thing that I think Valve absolutely has to nail here is the console-like experience. Games need to be able to launch with a good setup for graphic settings and controller settings to work well on the Steam Deck just from the get-go. Somebody needs to be able to download the game, hit play, and it already has optimized profile for graphic settings and control settings right there for the Steam Deck. Obviously, Valve probably can't do that for their entire Steam library, but it needs to be very easy for users to upload their own controller settings and graphical settings to a very prominent button to where the first time you launch the game, it needs to tell you like, use Valve's optimized settings and controls and or use the, have I been talking that long that my beautiful screen behind me just went to sleep? Anyway, but it needs to have a very prominent use optimized settings designed by Valve for graphics and controls, or use optimized settings voted on, like whatever the highest voted one from the community is. And those should be uploadable like that. Overall, I'm very excited about the Steam Deck. I don't think I'm quite its absolute target audience, meaning I didn't rush out and pre-order one of these things, but I'm very interested. If Valve nails the support, nails the operating system. They fixed a lot of the flaws that Steam machines had with controls and who's the target audience, what do you get by buying this that you don't get from a gaming PC or from some of the other major consoles. They've solved so many issues. Good job, Valve. Please continue the support on these things and let me know in the comment section what you guys think about all this. Have you already pre-ordered one? Are you going to wait and see? Is this something you're interested in at all? Am I way off in my analysis? I love jumping in on the comment sections, and I hope that all of you have an excellent day.